It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin.
Sort of a sing-song, not complete, but sort of.
Can I improve on it? I don't know.
No, no, you don't fix what's not broken. You're doing just fine here. So Esperanza, I got to be honest. Hampton Bays, and that's our episode today. Hampton Bays, as we expand our horizons from our admittedly somewhat East Hampton town centric home base. It's always been has it always been sort of a mystery to you as well? Like, I mean, have you spent much time in Hampton Bays? I mean, Esperanza's lived here for longer than I have and full time for that period of time. Would you say?
I mean, it's sort of like, could I say that I'm very familiar with Hampton Bays? No. We have had friends that live in Hampton Bays, O'Malley's in Hampton. I mean, whatever, you'd go for a specific reason, maybe one time to the beach,
Right. Okay.
But other than that, I have to say that it's only, in maybe the past year that I kind of have gotten more of a sense of what the history of the place is also.
Yet another excellent, unbelievable segue. So Esperanza, in terms of the history, not only are you going to get a little piece of history from our special guest, and here's the part I love about this the most. She's third generation Hampton Bays. Okay.
And we like that because that means you are an expert.
That's right. That's right. So without further ado, the executive director of the Hampton Bays Historical Society and a third generation resident, Brenda Sinclair. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, we are like, I would have rolled out a red carpet, but I'm not that, Hampton Bays, it's not that close for me to get over there and do that. So, but to touch on that for a minute, Brenda, you mentioned to me when we spoke about a week ago that you were third generation Hampton Bays. And as Esperanza elaborated, we love that because, that you really have a sense, you can really dig into the sense of place. And so when you were born and bred, so when you were growing up there, and we touched on this when we spoke earlier, but what were some of those really experiences of growing up there? And also, if you had the similar kind of off-season, high-season contrast that we have come to learn to expect in East Hampton town.
Yes, we absolutely did. There were a lot of summer people when I was young. I would have summer friends who would come and be in our neighborhood, and they'd arrive somewhere after school stopped and be gone, and I'd never think of them again until the end of the year started again when summer started.
Right.
So yes, there was a lot of summer people, summer friends. Swimming lessons was a big thing.
Right.
I still have friends that I used to go to swimming lessons every once in a while. I see them.
That's great. I mean, that added a little variety to life, right?
Yeah. It was a big social life.
And part of what you were saying to me when we spoke, and when the two quote unquote groups merged, the summer kids, the year-round kids, everyone just totally they totally got along, and it was just great experience. Like there was no
problems.
Yeah.
There was they're a city person and I'm not. They were just people coming that were there. I don't know. It was never an issue.
It wasn't a thing of summer people, summer not.
Yeah.
Right.
I think as I got older, there's definitely summer people and some are not. Yes. But when I was younger, they were just people. I think there were a lot more summer people back then. Now there's a lot more year-round residents, I think.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about that, Esperanza, about, that aspect, through my business, I used to have clients that I would go to Hampton Bays for, and a lot of them, were interestingly living there year round, yet were, New York City firefighters, police, people who could have schedules where they can work consecutive days and then have consecutive days off. I ran into a lot of that. And I think Brenda mentioned that as well. You said something to me while they were second homeowners, it was more, it wasn't like a summer colony like the Southampton summer colony was. These were real regular folk. Like Springs
Yes.
is, for example, back where I live. You know,
Mhm.
would you say so? Like that's
Yeah, or even Montauk, I kind of envision it being more parallel to what Montauk was and continues to be in a way.
with maybe with yeah, go ahead, Brenda. I'm sorry.
I think a lot of people came out here because they like the beaches, the fishing, and this was like far enough. It was close enough to the city that you could come out with your family. The father could go back for the week to work,
Right.
take a train out, drive, whatever, and it was easy enough to go back and forth without abandoning your family within out of reach.
Well, that's always been like, you know, for me, like just I used to I've actually used this term, like, you know, living in Springs where I do. Once I'm able to cross the Shinnecock Canal, I feel like I'm in civilization again. Like I can get somewhere. You know, for me, Esperanza and I have bantered about this on prior episodes. You know, living in Springs, for me to go to Costco is a half day event. You know, or something like that. And Brenda, you know, as much as I'd love to come and visit you, if you said, "Hey, come to Hampton Bays," I say, "Well, can I do it on my way to Queens?" Because
Yeah.
you know that's sort of what it is. But that's why this place is, again, it is a little bit of a mystery. So it does have sort of a resort vibe, like especially in the summer, like like East Hampton does, has a resort atmosphere, but it does have that year-round presence, really, basically because of the proximity to New York. But what are the other intangibles about this place, Brenda? Like what else can you tell us about us? Esperanza, I should really fill you in. I sort of said to Brenda, does Hampton Bays sort of have like a little chip on their shoulder, like, you know, looking at Southampton the way us Bonnickers and Springs look at the Upstreeters in East Hampton Village? And you know, is there any kind of element of that, Brenda, that you've
I don't think there really is. I don't think there is as much of a variety.
Right.
I'm sure there's some people who are like that. It's funny you asked that though, because my dad, as I say, third generation, my dad grew up in Hampton Bays. He was born in 1924. And he lived up the street from the Canoe Place Inn, which at that time was a very famous, lots of politicians, presidents,
Right.
royalty, everybody was at the Canoe Place Inn. And he always said it was like his playground when he was a kid. They went over, there was a bowl, there was chickens and pigs and gardens, and you know, the canal was there. And somebody asked him once, we were doing an oral history, actually, it was two people, and they said, well, weren't you, you know, were you jealous of these people? Were you upset that they were there? And even then they said, no, they were just, you know, they brought color to our lives.
Exactly.
It was just people who came, and you know, they got to meet the governor of New York State and all sorts of things like that. There was never a jealousy there. I'm sure some people, you never know, didn't feel that way, but most of the people I know just accepted that they were happy to have these people there. My aunt, who is a few years older, said as a child, she used to go over to the inn and peek in the windows on a Friday night and Saturday night, because all the women would be dancing. They had always had live bands, and they'd go over and peek in the windows to see everybody dancing on the dance floor.
Yeah, and the Canoe Place Inn, I mean, you know, again, even not being, if someone would say to me word association, Hampton Bays, that would be the first thing that would come into my mind to say, would probably be the Canoe Place Inn. And I'm going a little off. See, this is what happens. Full disclosure to our Hamptons podcast audience, we always have this little outline, but I always issue a warning to the guest. Sometimes we can veer, right, Esperanza? And
absolutely.
And the Canoe Place Inn is a place that fascinates me. I mean, it's obviously had a great history. Brett, has it been around? Was that what the early years of the Canoe Place Inn was, or CPI as they used to call it?
Right.
I remember the radio
CPI.
ads, right?
Yeah.
Calling it CPI. Were those its earliest years, Brenda, like in the turn of the 20th century?
Well, there was another building before this. The original building was built in, it was a way station in the forest between Riverhead and Southampton. And you would stop there and you'd be able to get refreshment and, you know, take care of your horses and all that kind of stuff, spend the night if you had to. And that was back in the late 1600s. So there has been something there since then. And there was a British fort behind it, and the British officers used to use the inn as their headquarters. And it grew from there. And there was a very large building there as an inn up until 1921 when it burned. And in 22, by 22, actually, within less than a year, they rebuilt the entire thing. So this is really the second building that's been there that we know of. I mean, there were others that morphed into the first building, but.
You know, Esperanza, I have to ask you this and say this to you before we get back to Brenda. It's extraordinary how many of these kind of iconic places seem to burn to the ground. And we've touched,
but fortunately they're rebuilt.
But they are rebuilt. I mean, we had the same thing. We did have an upcoming episode, past episode, I should say, on the Sea Spray Inn in East Hampton, where same thing. It just, the place burned to the ground, and that one in that case wasn't rebuilt, but it's unbelievable how many times this happens. But so this Canoe Place Inn has had a life. I mean, they were obviously, as you're describing, Brenda, these dignitaries, political figures, judges, what have you. And then
I picture it sort of like the Brewster House in Flanders. That just recently was demolished. But was it sort of, I think, that kind of place, like a lodge almost? I don't know.
Well, there were rooms, but there was there was a dining hall, there was a ballroom, there was we used to have weddings there, things like that.
Like a banquet hall,
a banquet hall. Thank you. I'm losing my words here.
Yes.
So, and a restaurant, of course. So it was more. That was Brewster House. I think was just a boarding house.
Was just a boarding
combination of both as well.
I just think about it as. I see. Yeah. No, I just think about it as like for the gathering place that it was of notable people. But I wanted to ask you also, I mean, Canoe Place Inn was that canoe place? Because there were these different little settlements that made up Good Ground, which, as we know, was the founding name of Hampton Bays. I mean, Hampton Bays didn't become Hampton Bays until
1922.
2 years before your father was born.
Right, exactly. Half of his family was born in Good Ground, half was born, or two of them were born in Hampton Bays.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Was there like a big brouhaha when they changed the name to Hampton Bays, Brenda? And this is something Esperanza and I have touched on. Is it possible that even back then they wanted to get that word Hampton into the name of?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. So back in the late 1880s, there was a push to become Bay Hampton. And that kind of died. And then it came back again. Matter of fact, we even had a Bay Hampton band, a local band for a while. But then they decided that Hampton Bays had a better sign, but it was a sound, but they wanted to be a part of the Hamptons. It was also instigated by the politicians and others. There was a lot of, I don't know about a lot of, but you can find a lot of letters from people who said, nothing wrong with Good Ground,
Right.
So,
yeah, we know about that here because living in Wainscott, we've found that with Mid Hamptons as the place that they wanted to rename Wainscott to be. And oh my gosh, the clippings about the people, we're losing all these good old fashioned names, these good solid names like Good Ground.
I have to say, it's true.
The Hamptonization, right? Yeah.
How many Hamptons do you need? You want to be, but that's what happens. So
I'm we've touched on this in prior episodes. Remember when I would be driving out, when we lived up island and we were coming out as weekenders, and I mean, you would go through the town of Brookhaven, and in certain portions there were developments, they were calling them Brookhampton, anything to get that cachet. I mean, these are this is in Mastic and they're calling it Brookhampton, like anything to sort of touch on that. And it's sort of like the beauty and the curse, it's funny. I could even relay a story to you. Like when we chose the name Our Hamptons for the podcast, I mean, full disclosure, for people to search for a podcast, if they were interested in this region, they're not going to search Our East End or Our Eastern Long Island. They want that Hamptons in there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, so Esperanza, I mean, according to Brenda, so we're going back to 1922, 101 years ago, they wanted that name. And here
so in Springs, if you go somewhere and somebody asks you where you're from, do you say, I guess you can legally say you're from the Hamptons?
Well, these are really great questions, because it's like,
well, then you're literally a Bonnaker, right?
right. Then you're literally a Bonnaker. Or, we're not an upstreeter, which is how we call, they used to refer to the villagers. We were not upstreeters. We were Bonnick. And so it's not me, I'm from Queens, but we were, they refer to themselves as Bonnick. So yeah, I mean, it's but that's extraordinary. I mean, I guess Esperanza and Brenda, I never thought it went back that long. That people wanted that cachet. Yes, I know early 20th century. Brenda, you've heard some of our episodes. We talk about the bookends, the estate sections, summer colonies, Southampton, East Hampton. They're 100 years plus old. It goes back even further. But I guess maybe that was, because it was really of that era, Esperanza. Maybe that was really the start of capitalizing.
Yeah, no, definitely. It concretely was, and probably, just building on the railroad coming out.
Yes.
This far, starting in the late 19th century, I would guess.
And
chambers of commerce just trying to
and
promote
again,
tourism and so forth.
And to your point about Mid-Hamptons, again, same kind of era, like the 20s. All in the same. So
it's
those
branding.
Yeah, the branding. Exactly. So Brenda, so your dad, when he I'm assuming this was when he was a little boy looking at the, whatever, late 20s, early 30s, like looking at the Canoe Place. And such a cool story. And then wow, we're really delving into this. Wow, Brenda, I hope we're not throwing you, but this Canoe Place Inn thing just fascinated me. I had to go down this lane. Then it, became, I remember, in, get a load of this term, Esperanza, my day. In my day, it was sort of like had a nightclub vibe. It was part of the night scene.
It became a discotheque. They put in the longest bar and
they used to advertise that on the radio, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
It wasn't summer without CPI.
Right.
Yeah. At one point, it was Peter Peaches. Do you remember that?
Oh, no.
It was a very dark time, if you ask me. They painted these massive peaches all over the entire building. These big, and it was Peter Peaches for about a year. I've never been able to find a photo of it, unfortunately, but it was about a year after they turned it into a discotheque. It was Peaches for a while.
Now, did it have this is another common theme on our Hamptons, like I mean, full disclosure, I'm really a morning person. Esperanza's a real, she was a real player in the day.
I'm the partier.
I'll be a huge partier of the Our Hamptons podcast. Co-host Esperanza, I think, is the bigger partier. She saw the nightlife a little more than me. I go to sleep at the 10 o'clock news. So, but we also do lament how there is such a lack of that now. Like, we did an episode about, speaking of springs, where we touched on Jungle Pete's. I mean, these people were dancing in the 1940s springs.
Right. Until 3 a.m.
Yeah, until 3 a.m. Here where, these streets are sort of shutting down, maybe not Sag Harbor, but I remember a place in Hampton Bays, the Bordy Barn, which was
I was going to ask you about the Bordy Barn.
Yeah, that I always had more of a, is it fair to say it was a little rowdier perhaps than the Canoe Place Inn?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
Notice the walking on eggshells there. I have the executive director of Hampton Bays Historical Society here, Esperanza. I have to walk on eggshells right there.
I think we can all say that if you walked into the Bordy Barn and didn't walk out covered in beer, you were not there.
Okay.
But dancing, you spend a lot of time dancing and singing.
Even I've been to the Bordy Barn, Esperanza.
See, I haven't.
See, hey, maybe I'm the real night owl here. But very, very cool. But Canoe Place Inn didn't have that kind of, I mean, it had a lot of lives, I guess. Would it be fair to say?
Yes, that's exactly it. A lot of lives. It kept recreating itself. So when it stopped being a catering hall, the owners at that time, I'd say it was early 70s, mid 70s, they built the Goldcrest Manor.
Okay.
Which is on North Highway and is currently the Jitney building.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted a newer catering hall, but they were there for a while. And then that's when the discotheque took over at the inn. That's when they became all those other ones.
Now, getting into your work, as we sort of move a little bit more into present day, you're the executive. How long have you been the executive director of the Hampton Bays Historical Society?
I don't even know.
Okay.
I prefer not to think. 15 years, maybe.
Did you found the camp?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
Okay. But you
How
had
old is the
young children when I
historical
was-
society? Just wondering.
But right, how long did you say I didn't hear. I lost what you say. You were there for how many years? You're there for how many years?
Around 50, well, yeah, officially around 15, 17 as the president, I guess it was. I don't know.
Okay.
When my children were younger, I was involved, but not as involved. I did like sessioning and things like that when they were in school.
Right.
Busy work.
Right.
But then after that, I became president, and not because there was a long line of people who were going to do it, but now we've got a nice board, and it's a lot of fun. We've got our buildings started, and once we had an official home, it made it a lot easier to move things forward and attract people.
Yeah, and it's really such look, you've heard some of our episodes. I mean, Esperanza and I have such enormous respect for the history and the sense of place of all of Eastern Long Island. And that's why it's so great to learn a little bit more, about Hampton Bays. Esperanza, I have to tell you, Brenda and I were talking about this because she does, and we'd love you to elaborate on this. You do these Thursday blog posts every week, right? And we were talking about this, of how even in creating our episodes, sometimes there's a challenge. You have to, delve into the material and everything else. And tell us about how you put all of that together, how you come up, what's your thought process in coming up, putting these thoughts together. And I guess it's a labor of love doing it.
Yeah, I think so. It's Wednesday and I'm not done yet. So
pressure's on.
Not always love that I'm feeling. It is labor. It started very simply, Facebook, when that became a thing, there was Throwback Thursday. So I would put up a picture, try to promote the Historical Society. Right. And somebody would ask me about it. So then I'd put a little blurb, and then there'd be more questions. So it eventually grew to every Thursday. It is posted on our Facebook page, but I also send it out to our membership. And it could be absolutely anything. Last week's was about the roller rink. Somebody had asked me about the roller. Actually, what happened is I went to the dermatologist, which is what the roller rink is today.
Oh
my
gosh, that's a blast from the past, the roller rink. I'd forgotten. Yeah. Oh
Esperanza Leon, as a young teenager, did you go to the Hampton Bays roller rink?
I believe I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the place to go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we were going much farther somehow, but that was as far as I imagined we went.
Wow. So that's the type of, somebody will ask me a question, or as I say, I went to the dermatologist. Every time I go there, I think about the roller rink, and I thought, oh, maybe it's time to try to delve into that. So it's kind of depends on what's going on.
I mean, so can I make the educated guess, Brenda, that the roller rink was a big part of your formative years as a young girl, teenager, what have you? Like that was, right?
It opened in 1964, and there was a lot of birthday parties. There was a birthday room, Esperanza, right. You may remember that. Of course, it was all cement block, so it was kind of funny when I think about this special room and I look at the pictures, and it's just a white room, but it was special when I was a kid.
We were no frills back then.
Right, exactly. So,
Esperanza, I bet you that roller rink didn't have many amenities.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
We're
all about the amenities.
We're about amenities, not. But yeah, that was. I actually remember, growing up in Queens, right over the city line, there was a place in Elmont, Long Island, like the first town in Nassau County, and we had a roller rink on. What talk about jarring a memory? Probably was very much evocative of this, called Wallcliff, and it was, Brenda really hit it. I remember. I mean, I'm going back. I don't know. I'm scared to say how long I'm going back, 50 years or whatever. I remember the cinder block there. So apparently,
that was the way to go with the roller rinks.
That was the thing about roller rinks, I guess, but I really remember that. That is really funny. But and it's interesting, like how those blog posts trigger, because a lot of times that's how our episodes just trigger. We'll read a blurb, we'll get something from the East Hampton Library, or something will just come into our head and we'll start exploring it. But the process is so much fun,
It is. And the old newspapers, I find them so intriguing. I could just get completely lost. The verbiage, the phrases they use, things that we never hear of, and I'm looking for one thing and I find 5 others, and a lot of time that's where I get my inspiration from.
Exactly right. Exactly
Yeah,
right.
some of the stories are just amazing.
Yeah,
Brenda,
and don't you discover that also sometimes history just keeps repeating itself,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And the things they complain about are things we complain about now.
Continue. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
right. Those kind of arguments, right? We always talk on our Hamptons. You go back 100 years in the East Hampton Star, you'll read some of the same arguments today. Why do they need? Why does the house have to be so big? You know, like
Yes.
similar
Yes.
kind of things. Speaking of that, the language and everything, is there a dialect at all in Hampton Bays? Like, you know, Esperanza does this much better than I do. Esperanza, can you give I really should be the one that does it better since I actually live in the Springs, but Esperanza is better.
Oh, gee, I might kill it though. I might not do it correctly. I'm embarrassed, but I'm just thinking like.
So we're going to give a little demonstration for Brenda of like the old Bonic dialect, which was, I guess, Bob and, you know, this sort of thing.
Like, yes, Bob. And
Yeah,
then
that was
like, be you working, Bob? Yes, I be.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Esperanza. That was what's even more impressive is Esperanza's from Venezuela and still can play that in, which is it's really amazing. I got him. She gets major props.
I'm good with languages.
She's a linguist, I guess.
I'm a polyglot.
Brenda, is there any? I guess what I'm saying is, can you tell like your grandparents, for example, or you know when you were growing up,
a different way of speaking, right?
Was there a little bit of a different way? Did you
different expressions? Yeah, different. My father actually, and his sisters, siblings, whatever, would always say instead of idea. That's the idea. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly.
Oh, like an accent on a different.
The emphasis. Right. Emphasis was on the idea. That's the whole idea, you know, and I see it, especially when my dad was speaking to like a childhood friend. Mm-hmm. They'd start talking and it just something little different, just different dialect, just a different relaxed speech. It was always, I always enjoyed it. But it was funny to hear it. And I don't think I hear it much anymore. I think it's kind of faded away.
Yeah, that's something. Esperanza, when I talk about that often, it's faded away from
scarce.
Here.
Yes,
yeah, it's very far and few between. You know, so was there any anyone that was alive like people like, you know, is there any term for the Hampton Bays people that have been born and bred there the way there is Bonacker here, for example? Did you have any kind of terms like your parents referred to your grandparents as anything, or there was nothing like that?
Not really. I mean, they may say a Bayman, but that's also what our school is the Bayman. Right. So, you know, not that I can think of. No. Okay. I'm never even sure whether we're good grounders or good groundians. I change it up in my blog.
Wow, that is great stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the Historical Society? Any upcoming projects coming on, or anything? Yeah.
We're on a little hiatus for now, but we are open every summer from Labor Day until October. We have the Liaison Hat Museum.
Okay.
The next time you make the journey over the bridge, you have to come see our hats. I know you probably don't think that's very interesting, but they're very artistic. It's very an interesting story how we ended up with this hat shop that catered to people from Southampton and East Hampton and all those good people.
I'm a fashionista.
Your type of people.
We're fashionistas. We're all about hats. So, you know, that fascinates us.
And I'm just curious because you said that you secured a building. So was this building, it's a historic building that is?
Yes. So we have actually 3 buildings. We have the Canoe Place Chapel, which is down on Canoe Place Road. You had asked about the different sections. And yes, that's, you know, Canoe Place Inn, Canoe Place Chapel. They're all right in the same area. And the story is that building was larger, the chapel, and it was split in half, and the Shinnecocks took half, and they use it as something right now. I don't remember what building, but it's still on the reservation. And there's a little cemetery with some Shinnecocks buried behind it. I think there's 5 of them up there now. And they floated across on the bay. This was obviously before the inlet came in, and the bay froze, and they split it in half, and they took their half and we kept our half. So that was one of our buildings that we've restored, was Canoe Place Chapel. And then we have the Prosper King House. It's right on Montauk Highway, past the Methodist Church as you're going east. on the north side of the road. And that was our first building. And that was where the Prosper King built back in, again, 1700s sometime was the building. It's been reorganized and reshaped, and there's parts of it missing, but we have a nice little house there. It used to be Ada's Attic. I don't know if either of you are antiques people, but people know it as Ada's Attic. And next to it is the Liaison Hat Shop. So the town bought the property. The people who owned Ada's Attic talked to the CPF people and said, we'd like this building to continue. So they donated it to CPF or sold it to CPF.
Right.
Okay.
And then we restored the building. So it's owned by the town, but we're the we take care of it.
Lessees,
Right.
or the stewards of the
Stewards. I can never remember that word.
Yeah.
And then the Liaison Hat Shop we opened about 5 years ago. And that was originally a country store located on the other side of the street. And sometime in the late 1800s, the King family bought it, moved it over to them, and they ran it as a store.
I see.
It's a whole story. It burned, part of it burned, and then
another fire. It's unbelievable.
Yes,
well, that's what happens with timber frames.
Yeah, I would say.
And no fire
cinder block,
departments,
right?
Yeah,
On the other hand,
that's
no fire
really good.
departments.
And Esperanza, also, I have to tell you, Brenda told me that now that I'm going to here's a controversial. You could almost say this is controversial, but you could definitely make an argument. Brenda's a big advocate of Hampton Bays having the most beautiful beaches of all out here. Isn't that
We
true,
do.
Brenda? Yeah.
We absolutely do. I'm
And
sorry,
just-
but we do. We don't
they're
have
very
lots of
wide.
building.
I mean,
They're
what
all
I've seen
dunes.
is very wide and open, right? Yeah,
No, we don't have building on our dunes, which is the difference.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a restaurant on the Bayside,
Bayside, right?
but nothing on the other side. There's no houses.
Well,
at all.
frankly, actually, that's an interesting thing because there's so few waterfront places like that, that really, when I think of Hampton Bays, that's actually where I would go to, eat right on the water,
Right.
Because there's not much here.
Yeah.
Brenda, I should really start wrapping up, but I have to say this Esperanza, I really got some serious insight into this place.
Well, it just, sometimes I think what people consider Hampton Bays is like they think of, I don't know, Macy's, right?
Yeah,
Like
right,
it just
yeah.
becomes like this destination to just go shopping, or like just a destination but what you're giving us is a picture of a place with lots of history, and clearly you say 4 buildings that belong to the Historical Society.
Which
that's
is fantastic.
incredible
That
that you
is-
have that collection and that resource and those resources rather.
And that should you be Esperanza really in perpetuity. I mean, that will be,
Right.
100 years
Right.
from now, they will still maintain these buildings, which is so important.
Which are what really translates into our sense of place, right? And for Hampton Bays, that must be that, like, instead of it being something so, I don't know, empty and contemporary, like a mall.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, because like you're right, you think about the Macy's and, you start thinking, wow, is this, and I guess it's an interesting question. I mean, is this more suburb than resort? It's just, everything's becoming a suburb in a sense. Even we feel it out here, even though when my wife has to go into work in New York every so often, it's a 3-hour jitney ride. So it's not really a suburb, but,
It's the feel of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like what you've given us is an idea of Hampton Bays being more of a small hamlet. I mean, it's a hamlet, right? So it's
a small Eastern Long Island town.
a small Eastern Long Island town. Exactly. Yeah.
Brenda Sinclair. We had a good time with you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
It was really a lot of fun for us too. And thanks for coming on. And again, I thank you for this insight into Hampton Bays and to give our audience a little bit more insight in, our Hamptons doesn't end at the Shinnecock Canal.
It certainly does not.
Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank
fun.
A
you.
lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.